Hello everyone and welcome to Coding Range. Today we'll be talking about Python variables and data types. To begin with, variables are reserved memory locations to store values, which means that when you create a variable, you reserve some space in memory. Based on the data type of a variable, the interpreter allocates memory and decides what can be stored in the reserved memory. Therefore, by assigning different data types to variables, you can store integers, decimals, or characters in these variables. So let's open up our file and begin to talk about how to assign variables, how to deal with them, and so on and so forth. Let me just uncomment that. Yes, this is our first example about assigning variables. First one you see is the simple integer type variable. And in order to declare a variable in Python, you should first declare the name of it. Then by the equal sign, you assign the value, which is the right-hand side of the equal sign, to the variable. In order to show you how it works, so let's just run it to see the result. As you can see, the variables are printed in the given order as we have written. So in Python, you don't need to explicitly declare Python variables. The declaration takes place automatically when you assign a value to a variable. In order to assign values to variables, we use the equal sign. To the left-hand side of the equal sign, we name our variables. As you can see, age, name, and score are written on the left-hand side of the equal sign. And on the right-hand side, we give the values. We assign these values. First one you see is an integer. Second is a string inside of a double quote. And the last one, the score variable, is a floating number, decimal point number, which we'll be talking about in the following minutes. So this was our first example. Coming to the next one, multiple assignments. Using Python language, you can assign a single value to multiple variables simultaneously. We can see that in this example. The first variant, we will assign 100 to A, B, and C. So let's just print it out to see the result. As you can tell, we have three variables, all have the same value, which is 100, and we can print it out. We can see that in results. You can print it out not just horizontally, but vertically by printing every variable on its own line. I'm just showing that as an example. The next variant, which is assigning multiple various values to different variables, which is shown here. You can see that we have three variable names: age, city, and year born. And you can see we are separating them with commas. And after the equal sign, we have values which are placed accordingly to the order of the value names. And if we print the result, we will see that this line will be printed out as a result. We have age, we have city, and we have the year born. One more thing I would like to talk about: when you name variables in Python language, you should follow some rules. Variable names cannot start with numbers. It should start with underscore or capital or lowercase letters, and numbers. You can add numbers in any place of the variable names, but not in the beginning. If you do so, you will get a syntax error. Let's just try, like for example, 13 is lucky. if you had like that, you see that it has been turned red, and if you try to print out that variable, it won't work. It will give a syntax error. Let's see. You see? Invalid decimal literal. We cannot use that, but we can do it like that. Or we can do it like starting with is 13 lucky, for example. And if you run that example, we won't get any errors. We'll get true written on different lines. Yeah, that works. As you can see, you should follow this rule. No numbers on the beginning of the variables. Next up is to talk about standard data types in Python. Python has 5 standard data types, which are numbers, string, list, tuple, dictionary. Python numbers, the number data types store numeric values. New number objects are created when you assign a value to them. For example, we have here an integer variable assigned. You name your variable, and on the right hand side of the equal sign you write the value itself. And if you let us just talk about it more, and we will get into examples. So in the numeric data types, there are 4 different numerical types. First of them is int, which is signed integers. There was long in Python 2, but it is converted to int as well in Python 3, so you shouldn't actually worry about that. Next up is float, which is denoted with a point between the numbers. So you should have, for example, some number, point, and the decimal side of the number. It will tell the system that this is a floating number. The next up is the complex numbers. Python has a support for these data types, and we will see what will be the results. So we are here creating a variable, for example, variable int, and we gave the value to it. Then we are printing the type of it. You'll see the types of these variables printed out in different lines. So as example, you can see the first variable we have integer type, and class int has been written in the console. The next step is float, which we denoted with a point. And in order to denote the complex numbers, you should add a j, which shows the imaginary side of the number. And this was about numeric types. So next up is strings. Strings in Python can be seen as a consecutive collection of characters represented inside of the quotation marks. Python allows for either pairs of single or double quotes. You can use single quotes and double quotes. It does not mean so much, but there are some cases that if you want to use like, let me just type it out. For example, if you want to use a single, you see, you cannot use like that. But if it is a string, this is actually this will cause a syntax error. We can see here. invalid syntax. But if you want to ensure that single quote, for example, it's a string, you should add double quotes around the string, and by printing it out, we can see that this works as intended inside of the double quotes. So if you want to use sentences like that, you should consider using double quotes instead of single quotes. So here is the double quoted version of the string. Let's print this out to see what we will get. And you cannot say that there is much difference between them because, again, as I said before, it only makes difference here when you add special characters inside of the double quotes. So let's talk about slicing. I will be talking about simple methods with strings and other variables for now, and in the next step we will be talking about different and most used methods for strings, for numbers, lists, dictionaries, sets, and tuples. So first of all, we should know how to slice or how to access the string elements with this notation. First of all, we declare our string and we assign it to a variable to use it inside of our program, and then we use this square bracket notation. In Python, as in other languages, other programming languages, counting starts from 0. Not counting, but if you think string is a set of characters, the first character has the index of 0. So it begins from 0 and adds up until the end. Like, for example, in this case, H has the index of 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. So in order to access the first character of the string, we should tell the computer to take our variable, then we should denote which index we should print out. And if you try to get the first character, we should just write 0 in order to access it. Let's print out to see what will be the result. As you can see, we have the H here as the result. So about the specific range. In order to get a specific set of characters from a string, you should use 2 indices with colon between them. It will take sixth, it will start printing out from the 6th character. So let's say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. White spaces count as a character as well, so they have their own indices. This is the 5th index of the string, which is a white space. Then from the 6th index, which is the P letter, goes to the 12th. So let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to the white space again. Let's run and see what happens. As you can see, we have the H, which is this print function's result. Then we have the Python printed out without a white space in front of it and without a white space after it. If we change that to 11th and run it again, we will see that no matter the n here, it has the index of 11, it will not be printed because first hand side of this expression is included, the right hand side is excluded. If you write 11, it will print out until the 11th character, so we should write 12 to get full word out of that print method. Then we have the method to print out the last character. In order to print out the last character, we use -1 inside of the square brackets. So let's see. Let me just uncomment these to not cause a confusion. As you can see, the last character of our string is a exclamation mark, and it has been printed here. So coming next up is the Python lists. Python lists are the most flexible of Python data types. A list is enclosed within the square brackets, and items in it are separated by a comma, as you can see here. Let me just uncomment that to see better. Lists resemble arrays in C, but the main difference between them is that all the items belonging to a list can be of different data type. For example, we have here first as a string, then we separate it with a comma, then comes 2, which is int, and you can see when you hover over it, the IDE shows what is it, like the class of it. For example, if I hover over to first, it doesn't work, but when it's int or when it's float, it shows the value and even the complex. So we have first as a string, then 2 as an int, 3.0 as a float, and the fourth again is a string. Then we have complex as the last character of a string. So that means we can have a string of different values, different data types. So let's just print out the list to see how will it react, how will it result in our console. We have, as you can see, it is printed out with square brackets as well, then the variables and the values inside of it. So we had it, and you can have lists with values of the same type. For example, we have here list of int variables and float variables and string variables. We can have even complex variables as well. In order to see them again, we should print them out, and we will see that they are printed as written. Next up is how to access list elements. It is the same. It has the same way of accessing them. You access list elements with the square bracket notation. In order to, for example, in here we are accessing the fourth element inside of the list. Again, indexes start from 0. So if you count, for example, 0, 1, 2, and 3, we get the fourth element inside of the list. If you confuse this, you can use it as like, if it's inside of the square brackets, if you add 1 to that value, you will get the number of the element, like the order of the elements. So if we are accessing the element with the index 3, that means we are accessing the element like fourth element. So let me just do it like that to not confuse, to not cause confusion. As you can see, if we access the fourth elements of the first list, we get fourth printed out to the output. And you can see that it is not printed out like with single quotes around it as we had it here in the list. Because we are accessing the list element, we get the element itself, which is a string, and strings are printed out without single quotes. But if you like, I will talk about it later. Next up is combining slicing string lists and using them together. For example, in here, you should remember that expression, we have square brackets and we have two indices separated with colons. And we talked about it here when we were talking about strings in Python. This is called slice operator. So in this line, we are using slice operator to access the first two elements of this string list and then the last element of the same list. So let's see that in our output. As you can see, when we access the list with the slice operator, it takes the first and the second element of the string of the list, and then it makes it another list. Then we have separated two expression with comma on the, and the last expression here takes the last element of the list, which is Python. As you can see, I and love printed out as a list, as a new list. Then Python has been printed out as a string, as just an ordinary free element. So we can say that we can have that conclusion. Slice operator, when used with lists, they make a new list with the given range of indices. Next up, we have tuples. Tuple is another sequence that is similar to the list. A tuple consists of number of values separated by commas as well as in lists. So one of the main differences here that we denote tuples with not with square brackets but with parentheses. And the other main difference is that list elements are mutable, meaning that they can be changed after declaring the list, but tuples are different. When you have declared a tuple, when you assign variables inside of it, you cannot access the variable again throughout the program and change its value. If we try to run that code, we will get an error right away. As you can see here, we have type error which says tuple object does not support item assignment, which means tuples are immutable and they are noted with parentheses. So in order to talk about tuples, it has the same set of methods for accessing the elements of it. For example, here we are accessing the fourth element again. We can write, for example, third element. We will have 3.0 printed out because, again, first index and second and third index. As you can see, 3.0 has been printed out to the output. Next up, we can use slice operator here as well with the tuples, and we'll see what will our result be. Yeah, as you can see, when we use the slice operator, again, the known tuple gets sliced and a new tuple is created, then it's printed out. So that means we can access this a new tuple, and we can actually assign that to another variable. For example, if we try to run the code like that, for example, my slice tuple equals my tuple, for example, and if we try to print out the newly created tuple, we should get the result as we had it before, like we should get the tuple, a new tuple with the elements first and 2. As you can see, we have created a new variable, we have assigned a new tuple, which takes the existing tuple, my tuple, slices and takes the first, second element of the tuple, and then we printed it out and we see the results. You can try these programs along with me, typing and seeing the results. It will be easier for you to learn like that. And then again, in order to access the last element of a tuple, of a list, of a string, we should use the -1. Not should, but generally we use -1. There are some other ways as well. So if you run this code, we should get the 5.13j printed out, which is a complex number. Next up, we have Python dictionaries. Python dictionaries are kind of a hash table type. They are based on key value pairs, resembling JavaScript objects. If you're familiar with JavaScript object notation, which is JSON, it will be easier for you to learn Python dictionaries. Dictionaries are unordered and they are enclosed with curly braces, as you can see here. And inside of these curly braces, there are key value pairs separated by commas. So we have that expression of two. Let's say first of all, name here, like left-hand side of the column, is our key, and the John in double quotes. The right-hand side of the column is the value, and this applies to other expressions as well. We have name, surname, age, and profession on the left-hand side of the columns, which are keys, and on the right-hand side of the columns we have values, which can be of any type, like John here is a string, surname is a string, then we have int as an age, and again we have string as a profession, as a value. But when it comes to keys, we use strings and numbers, like we can say they are mostly used. So let's print out our dictionary to see how it will be printed out to the console, to our output. As we can see that, again, as we can see that we have again the same notation. We have curly braces around our output. We have first key, name, colon, then value, then again comma to start a new key value pair. This goes the same, and this is our dictionary printed out. So how can we access some elements of this dictionary, or can we change some elements of the dictionary? As we said, dictionaries are unordered and they are mutable. That means you can create new dictionary key value pairs outside of this assignment. For example, let me just talk about how we can access some elements of that dictionary. So again, we use bracket notation, and inside of that notation we add key. Here we use name. We will run this code and see that Let me comment that out to not cause confusion. So yeah, we have John printed out. So that means when we access the dictionary by the key, we should get the value printed out. That means if you write here inside of the single quotes, for example, age, we should get 30 printed out to the console. And that means when you write keys inside of the square brackets, you will get values the accordingly printed out to the output. Let me just comment that out. So there are two methods that are used in dictionaries. I think these methods are available in JavaScript as well when you try to access keys and values of an object. So if you run that code, we get dictionary keys, which are name, surname, age, and profession. As you can see here, name, surname, age, and profession, all to the left of the column, which are keys, printed out to the console. Then we have values, dictionary values, which are on the right hand side of the column. We can use that when requesting some like using some APIs to fetch data from internet. These are so useful when we are dealing with that kind of data. So as I said, dictionaries are mutable. That means we can access or we can create a new dictionary key value pair outside of the assignment. So here we rewrite my dictionary square brackets. We type city, which is the key name, inside of the single quotes, and we assign a new value. For example, New York. As you can see that inside of here, when we first declared our dictionary, we don't have a key or key named city or the value named New York. You may think that this will cause an error, but it will not. Actually, I haven't printed it out. I'm sorry. Actually, when we try to print out our dictionary, we should get a new key value pair, which you can see here. We don't have it here, no city, no New York, but when we run this line of code, dictionary gets updated and it has now city as a key and New York as a value inside of it. So you can add as many key value pairs as you want. For example, here we are adding salary and the value of it. So we have city from the previous line, then we have salary as a floating number. Dictionaries are so handy when dealing with lots of data, when you're coding a database, and we will talk about them in the following tutorials. As a last step, I would like to talk about type conversions, which are used in Python to convert data types like from int to string, or string to int, and vice versa, from float to int, and so on and so forth. You will see these in here. First of all, we have declared a variable called variable string, and we have assigned a value inside of single quotes, which is a string. Then, in order to cast that into into int variable. We write int, we write the class or the type of the variable we want to get. We add parentheses, and inside of that we add the variable that we want to change. So if we run that code, we should get, so first of all, in our code we are declaring a string, then we are declaring a new variable which is int, var to int, and then with that casting operator, with that casting method, we are casting this string into an int, and we will see that here, as you can see, first line is the string variable, second line is the int variable. You may think that they are the same, but they are not. The reason is that strings are not in order to prove that, we can type we can print out types of these variables to our console. As you can see, the first line we have var string is a class of string. The next line is int. The thing, in order not to confuse this difference, is that you cannot add strings to int, like if we're gonna tell it in a simple way. For example, if I try to run this line var string plus var to int, you may think that the result will be 12, but it will not be 12 because we get an error, we get a type error. You cannot concatenate string to int. That means if we run this code, if we cast that again with this method, we should not get an error, but we should not get 24 as well. You see, this is called a concatenation of strings. When you add two strings with a plus sign, they get together, they join together. For example, if we have, if we write here, let me type new string, which is I love, then second string, for example, Python. If we run that code, this code, we should get, we don't need to cast anything because they are both strings. Let me just comment these out to not cause confusion. We should get this line printed out. As you can see, I have put a white space here. The reason is that if I don't, the result will look like that. I love Python without a space. So when you think of concatenation, you take one string, the program takes one string, like I can say, inside of these double quotes, and adds this line here right away, and takes these double quotes away, and you can see we have it printed out as this. But if we put white space here, program takes that to here and erases double quotes, we get I love Python with a white space around it. So keep that in mind to not get any errors when you are typing new codes. So we talked about converting strings, ints to strings, and here we can have the vice versa as well. As I said, if you type str, which stands for string, and type any variable, for example var to int, you should get a string value. Next up is converting lists to tuples. If you can remember, the main difference between tuples and lists are that tuples are immutable, meaning that the values inside cannot be changed after the declaration. And other thing is that tuples are denoted by brackets rather than parentheses rather than square brackets as in lists. Let me just comment that out as well. We don't need that. So first of all, we declare a list. We give some values to it. And then we have the next variable, which is var to tuple. And we use the casting operator, the casting method of tuple with parentheses, and we add the variable we want to make a tuple from, which is our list, and then we printed it out. So if we run this code, we will get a tuple version of this list. That means, let me write it like that. If I try to run this, for example, var list, if I try to make the third element of the list not of string type but of int type, for example, let's say if I like to, or let's say I would like to change that to a float, which is like that, which I let's write pi. And if I try to print that out, for example, var list, let me print that, let me comment that for now. We should get a new tuple. Let's write it like that. Print. Oh, it's like that. Print var list. As you can see, first of all, we have the var list as it is without any change. But after that line, after printing our list, we access the third element and we change its value. Then we print it out again, and as you can see, the third element of our original list is now changed to something new. That means lists are mutable, meaning that you can change their values. Let's comment this out and come back to our tuples. So we have our tuple here. So as you can see, we changed our list. We actually not changed, but we create a new tuple from our existing list and we assign it to a variable. Then we print it out. But if we try to access and change, for example, var to tuple, for example, the second element to an int version, and then print it out, we should get a syntax error, because as we have said, tuples are immutable. Tuple objects does not support item assignment, meaning that you cannot change any elements of a tuple after it's declared. Comment this out, and so we have again, we talked about this, and again we have vice versa, like we changed the list into a tuple, and we can do the way around. We can change a tuple into a list as well. We can cast tuples into lists. So if we print that out, we should get, like, we have var list here, our original list. Then we cast into a tuple, which turns into, let me uncomment this to explain. So we have original list, which is being casted into tuple, and then we take that tuple, this one, and we cast it with the method of list in parentheses. We get a new list from that tuple, which is similar to our first list. This is a bit confusing. We can try to do it like that if we don't want to get confused. So we can add like so we have 5 elements inside of our original list and original tuple. We can try to change a variable. For example, the last variable, I like to change it to Roman notation. So we should have, as you can see, this is our original tuple, which is created from an original list. Then we have a new list created from this tuple with a changed value. If I do that, it will be more confusing, but I like to show how it changed. Let's run it again and see. This is our original list, which is declared here, which then turned into a tuple, and you can see it here denoted with a parentheses, immutable, and then we have a new list which is created from our tuple and assigned a new variable. That means it is mutable. So let me print this. Let me comment this again. So we have we don't need that as well. We have another conversion, which is where is it? Yeah, sets. Sets are another data collections to store data of Python, and we can see here that we don't need var to list. Where is var to list? Line 2000 var to list, var to set. Yes, that was an error. Sets are used to store multiple items in a single variable, and they are written with curly braces, curly brackets, and a set is a collection which is both unordered and unindexed. So there is no order and no index of set elements. They are just inside of this specific value, specific variable, and you don't know how will the output be because there is no indexing and there is no order, so no, don't know how to expect what will the result be. This was our tutorial for today. We talked about different data types and variables and some methods to use, and we'll be talking about these variables and these data types in depth in following tutorials. So be sure to subscribe, drop a like, and write down your opinions in the comments below, like what would you like to see in this channel, and see you soon.